Hey, let's pick up there after my mom duty was done. They walked on again in silence, and finally she said thoughtfully, "You know, I'm not afraid of you at all." He was surprised. "Why should you be?" "So many people are. Afraid of firemen, I mean. But you're just a man after all." He saw himself in her eyes, suspended in two shining drops of bright water, himself dark and tiny in fine details, the lines about his mouth, everything there, as if her eyes were two miraculous bits of violet amber that might capture and hold him intact. Her face, turned to him now, was fragile milk crystal with a soft and constant light in it. It was not the hysterical light of electricity, but what? The strangely comfortable and rare and gently flattering light of the candle. One time, as a child in a power failure, his mother had found and lit the last candle, and there had been a brief hour of rediscovery. Of such illumination, the space lost its vast dimensions and drew comfortably around them, and they, mother and son alone, transformed, hoping the power might not come on again too soon. And then Clarissa McCallum said, "Do you mind if I ask, how long have you been working as a fireman?" "Since I was 20, 10 years ago." "Do you ever read any of the books you burn?" He laughed. "That's against the law." "Oh, of course. It's fine work. Monday burn Millay, Wednesday Whitman, Friday Faulkner. Burn 'em to ashes, burn the ashes. That's our official slogan." They walked still further, and the girl said, "Is it true that long ago firemen put fires out instead of going to start them?" "No, houses have always been fireproof. Take my word for it." "Strange. I heard once that long ago houses used to burn by accident, and they needed firemen to stop the flames." He laughed. She glanced quickly over. "Why are you laughing?" "I don't know." He started to laugh again and stopped. "Why?" "You laugh when I haven't been funny. And you answer right off. You never stop to think what I've asked you." He stopped walking. "You are an odd one," he said, looking at her. "Haven't you any respect?" "I don't mean to be insulting. It's just, I love to watch people too much, I guess." "Well, doesn't this mean anything to you?" And he tapped the numbers 451 stitched on his char-colored sleeve. "Yes," she whispered and increased her pace. "Have you ever watched the jet cars racing on the boulevards down the way?" "You are changing the subject." "I sometimes think drivers don't know what grass is or flowers because they've never seen them slowly," she said. "If you showed a driver a green blur, oh yes, he'd say there's grass. A pink blur, oh, that's a rose garden. White blurs are houses, brown blurs are cows. My uncle drove slowly on the highway once. He drove 40 miles an hour and they jailed him for 2 days. Isn't that funny and sad, too?" "You think too many things," said Montag uneasily. "I rarely watch the parlor walls or go to races or fun parks. So I've got lots of times for crazy thoughts, I guess." "Have you seen the 200-foot-long billboards in the country beyond town? Did you know that once billboards were only 20 feet long? The cars started rushing by so quickly that they had to stretch the advertising out so it would last." "I didn't know that," Montag laughed abruptly. "But I know something else you don't. There's dew on the grass in the morning." He suddenly couldn't remember if he had known this or not, and it made him quite irritable. "And if you look," she nodded to the sky, "there's a man on the moon." He hadn't looked for a long time. They walked the rest of the way in silence, hers thoughtfully, his kind of clenching and uncomfortable silence in which he shot her accusing glances. And when they reached her house, all its lights were blazing. "What's going on?" Montag had rarely seen that many house lights. "Oh, just my mother and father and uncle sitting around talking. It's like being a pedestrian, only rarer. My uncle was arrested another time. Did I tell you? For being a pedestrian? Oh, we are most peculiar." "But what do you talk about?" She laughed at this. "Good night." She started up her walk, and then she seemed to remember something and came back to look at him with wonder and curiosity. "Are you happy?" she asked. "Am I what?" he cried. But she was gone. running in the moonlight, her front door shut gently. Happy of all the nonsense. He stopped laughing. He put his hand into the glove hole of his front door and let it know its touch, and the front door slid open. Of course I'm happy. What does she think I'm not? He asked the quiet rooms. He stood looking up at the ventilator grill in the hall and suddenly remembered that something lay hidden behind the grill, something that seemed to peer down at him now, and he moved his eyes quickly away. What a strange meeting on a strange night. He remembered nothing like it, save one afternoon, a year ago, when he had met an old man in the park and they had talked. Montaigne shook his head. He looked at a blank wall. The girl's face was there, really quite beautiful in memory, astonishing in fact. She had a very thin face, like the dial of a small clock seen faintly in a dark room in the middle of a night when you're awakened to see the time, and see the clock telling you the hour and the minute and the second. With the white silence and the glowing, all certainly in knowing what it has to tell of the nights passing swiftly on towards further darkness, but moving towards a new sun. What? Asked Montaigne of the other self, the subconscious idiot that ran babbling at times, quite independent of will, habit, and conscience. Glanced back at the wall. How like a mirror, too, her face. Impossible. For how many people did you know that refracted your own light to you? People were more often, he searched for a simile, and found one in his work. Torches, blazing away until they whiffed out. How rarely did other people's faces take of you and throw back to you your own expression, your own innermost trembling thought. What incredible power of identification the girl had. She was like an eager watcher of a marionette show, anticipating each flicker of an eyelid, each gesture of his hand, each flick of a finger, the moment before it began. How long had they walked together? 3 minutes? 5? Yet how large that time seemed now. How immense a figure she was on the stage before him. What a shadow she'd throw on the wall with her slender body. He felt as if his eye itched. She might blink. And if the muscles of his jaw stretched impermanently, she would yawn long before he would. Why, he thought, now that I think of it, she almost seemed to be waiting for me there in the street, so damn late at night. He opened the bedroom door. It was like coming into a cold, marbled room of a mausoleum after the moon had set. Complete darkness, not a hint of the silver world outside. The windows tightly shut, the chamber a tomb world where no sound from the great city could penetrate. The room was not empty. He listened. The little mosquito, delicate, dancing hum in the air, the electrical murmur of a hidden wasp snug in its special pink horn nest. The music was almost loud enough so he could follow the tune. He felt his smile slide away, melt, fold over and down on itself like a tallow skin, like the stuff of a fantastic candle burning too long and now collapsing and now blown out. Darkness. He was not happy. He was not happy. He said the words to himself. He recognized this as a true state of affairs. He wore his happiness like a mask, and the girl had run off across the lawn with the mask, and there was no way of going to knock on her door and ask for it back. Without turning on the light, he imagined how this room would look. His wife stretched on the bed, uncovered and cold, like a body displayed on the lid of a tomb, her eyes fixed to the ceiling by invisible threads of steel, immovable, and in her ears the little seashells, the thimble radios tamped tight, and an electric ocean of sound, of music, and talk and music, and talk coming in on the shore of her unsleeping mind. The room was indeed empty. Every night the waves came in and bore her off on their great tides of sound, floating her wide-eyed toward morning. There had been no night in the last 2 years that Mildred had not swum that sea, had not gladly gone down in it for the 3rd time. The room was cold, but nonetheless he felt that he could not breathe. He did not wish to open the drapes and open the French windows, for he did not want the moon to come into the room. So with the feeling of a man who will die in the next hour for lack of air, he felt his way toward his open, separate, and therefore cold bed. An instant before his foot hit an object on the floor. He knew he was hit such an object. It was not unlike the feeling he had experienced before turning the corner and almost knocking the girl down. His foot, sending vibrations ahead, received back echoes of the small barrier across its path. Even as the foot swung, his foot kicked. The object gave a dull clank and slid off in the darkness. He stood very straight and listened to the person on the dark bed in the completely featureless night. The breath coming out of the nostrils was so faint, it stirred only the furthest fringes of life. A small leaf, a black feather, a single fiber of hair. He still did not want outside light. He pulled out his igniter, felt the salamander etched on his silver disc, and gave it a flick. 2 moonstones looked up at him in the light of his small hand-held fire. 2 pale moonstones buried in the creek of clear water over which the life of the world ran, not touching them. Mildred! Face was like a snow-covered island upon which rain might fall, but felt no rain, over which clouds might pass their moving shadows, but she felt no shadow. There was only the singing of the thimble wasp and the tamped shut ears, and her eyes all glass, and breath going in and out softly, faintly, and out her nostrils, and not caring whether it came or went or came. The object he had sent tumbling with his foot now glinted under the edge of his own bed. The small crystal bottle of sleeping tablets, which earlier today had been filled with 30 capsules, and which now lay uncapped and empty in the light of the tiny flare. As he stood there, the sky over the house screamed. There was a tremendous ripping sound, as if 2 giant hands had torn 10,000 miles of black linen down the seam. Montag was cut in half. He felt his chest chopped down and split apart. The jet bombers going over. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 6 of them, 9 of them, 12 of them. One and another did all the screaming for him. He opened his mouth and let their shriek come down and out between his bared teeth. The house shook. The flare went out of his hand. The moonstones had vanished, and he felt his hand plunge towards the telephone. The jets were gone. He felt his lips move, brushing the mouthpiece to the phone. Emergency hospital. A terrible whisper.